Hello. I'm Alex Davy. I'm the senior design lead at Wizkids. Here to talk a little bit about Onslaught, a little bit about the work that I'm doing for the company, and maybe even a little bit about what the future holds. Game design was never my plan. I'm happy where I landed, but no, I went to school for English and journalism. Always wanted to be a writer. Ended up pursuing that for many years. Worked as a reporter for a small local newspaper for a while. Went into freelance journalism, freelance writing for magazines, freelance copy editing, that kind of thing. Journalism is a tough gig, especially post about 2008 or so. It's still tough. And as a freelancer, I ended up doing a lot of proofreading and copy editing for role-playing games. And I got that connection through a friend and former colleague at the newspaper who ended up getting a job as the role-playing games editor at Fantasy Flight Games. So he was always looking for freelancers, always looking for people who could, edit, and particularly people who had a gaming background, because it's always better to have someone who kind of understands the source material. So I ended up doing, work for Sam Stewart for 3 or 4 years, and eventually a job opportunity came up. They listed the listing was for creative content developer, and so I thought it would be like writing, editing, that kind of thing. But the first thing that they did after I passed through like the initial selection process was they gave me a game design test. So they had me design a scenario for Descent 2nd Edition. And that was when I realized, this is actually like a developer job. That's cool. I think I can do this. They ended up liking my scenario. I got hired on as essentially a developer, although the title was creative content developer. And at that point, I just kind of tried to find the stuff within the company that I was interested in, and sort of maneuver myself onto those teams. I've always loved miniatures games, so X-Wing was a really natural fit for me. I kind of cut my teeth developing that game. Armada came along, did a lot of work on that, and then eventually I was fortunate enough to be able to design my own game, which was Star Wars Legion. That's my background as a developer and a designer. For the past almost 3 years now, I've been with WizKids in a slightly different role. I kind of describe it as more of an editorial role. I am working with outside designers. I'm taking unfinished games and applying that final level of polish, doing play testing, and doing a lot of the sort of production stuff that you need to do, art descriptions, organizing artists and illustrators, and working with our internal graphic designers, writing rule books, just kind of a little bit of everything at this point. But it's very much an editor type role where I'm not creating the initial designs or content. I'm looking for people with good ideas, and then I'm trying to bring those ideas to life in the most polished way possible. That's a great question, and it's an easy one for me actually, because I like the Red Wizards so much. I like magic. I like their sinister nature, and I really like their gameplay. They're very fragile, and they have low hit points, and they don't have a lot of the protection that the other factions have. Their healing is very weak, and it's kind of hard to keep them alive. But they have the ability to summon skeletons and a lot of really powerful spells that they can, inflict from range. So if you're a clever player, you can use the summoned skeletons to absorb a lot of the damage that your wizards would otherwise be taking. And I think it's a faction with a very high skill floor, but also a high skill ceiling, and you can really have a lot of success with it. I also like the Zentarum a lot, because they have high mobility, resilience, and they're very good at taking down single targets. But at the tournament, the most popular faction was the Harpers, because they're just super consistent, very well-rounded. They don't really have any particular weaknesses, and they have some major strengths. So all the factions are a little bit different and kind of fun to play in their own particular ways. I will have to say it is a Red Wizards character. I like his name. I like his whole situation, Zook Doublefilch, because he's got a lot of really interesting loot-based stealing mechanics. You can steal items, and you can steal a spell from either a friendly character or an enemy character, but you have to position him exactly right. He's got a cool little mini with a little mage hand grabbing a coin purse. He's got a great name, and he's got a really powerful ranged basic attack support spell that lets him apply damage and debuffs from long range. So he's really quality. I almost always bring him when I'm playing Red Wizards because he's got so much utility. Well, I think I would love to start exploring some of the non-competitive aspects of Onslaught. We've started doing a little bit of that with some cooperative and solo stuff, but I think the foundations of the game are incredibly strong, and it is really poised to be an excellent dungeon crawler. So my hope is not really to change what Onslaught's all about, because the competitive scene is always going to be a major focus. It is first and foremost a skirmish game. But I think the more content we can generate, the more adventures we can produce, the more we can appeal to that wider audience of people who are maybe not the cutthroat competitive type, but they just want a more fun dungeon crawl experience, something that is not going to pit them against their friends, but allow them to work with their friends to go on adventures. That's a really good question. I'll go with scenario because I think those are some of the most interesting things to design. And there's been a lot of really cool ones, some wacky ones, some interesting asymmetrical ones. My favorite scenario is one of the simplest, but I think it really illustrates why Onslaught is so much fun. I really like the Horde. It's the scenario from the core set. There's a competitive version of it. It's all about controlling these control points and dealing with an endless stream of monsters, as well as the enemy party. I really think that's kind of like a crash course in learning what it takes to be successful as an Onslaught player, because you have to juggle all of these different things. At the same time, it's really simple, it's really elegant, and it almost always leads to a really fun, really dynamic game. So I think that scenario is great. I kind of reference that scenario when we're trying to do new scenario designs because I think it has a lot of strengths. Well, I would really love it if, the community continues to grow, tournaments get bigger, local stores start running events more, and I would love in 5 years for there to be a dedicated Onslaught community that's talking about the meta, talking about upcoming character releases and expansions. We want to create a more accessible price point for people to get into the game, because the core set has a ton of value. It's a ton of miniatures, it's 2 full factions, but it's up there in price. So something that's going to allow people to dip their toes into the game a little bit more easily, I think, is a big goal of ours. And alongside that, just I'm hoping there's a lot of cool adventures on the way. So new maps, new monsters, new scenarios to play, and new adventures to go on. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the interesting thing about Onslaught is that we do have math and charts and formulas and everything, but it's not a points-based miniatures game like so many are, where you are creating a roster and spending a certain number of points and building it yourself. It's very simplified. You just take 5 characters into your mission, and they all have to have a different role. So in some ways it's harder to balance because there are no points. You can't adjust up or down. But in other ways it's easier to balance because you just have to make sure that you're just trying to make sure that no character is like head and shoulders above the rest. Obviously we don't always succeed at that, but it is helped by the fact that like you can't take just 5 range damage characters and annihilate someone from range. You can't take a bunch of healers and never be defeated. You are forced to diversify your party. and I think that helps with the balance aspect a lot. I think the other thing that helps with balance is that we're constantly coming out with new characters for every faction. So if a character is a little weaker, you can sub in someone that you prefer, and that's kind of the attitude that we've taken is like, well, let's keep rather than designing something that's just better than a previous character, we're looking for side grades. We're looking for someone totally different. If we've done a healer before that's just really good at single target heals and that kind of thing, the next healer we do, maybe they're more focused on short range aura type heals or some other aspect of the game. So it's not so much like which one of these is better, it's which one of these is better for the scenario that I am faced with. One of the things I like about Onslaught so much is that you get to choose your party of 5 after you see the scenario that you're going to play. So you can really zone in, hone in on the characters that are going to help you in this specific scenario. And you can use your whole collection for that. Oh man, at this point, probably close to 100 across almost 3 years of development. And some of those games, of course, were when the game was in an earlier state. But yeah, I try to play every scenario. I try to play every character. I have so far. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that forever, but so far I've been able to weigh in on just about everything in the game. And it's fun. It's fun to be in kind of a different role and sort of just seeing somebody else's designs and then just trying to shape them and guide them a little bit instead of starting from the blank page like I used to when I was developing my own content. Yeah, I think the wackiest interactions have come from the fact that you can level up mid-attack, and then there are certain abilities, especially in some of the newer characters, that allow you to do things after the attack. So being able to hit that 5th experience point, get a new level up card, and have that immediately change the game has led to some very crazy interactions. Especially if it's a like an opportunity attack or a combat reflexes that's already interrupting somebody else's turn, and then you're adding something else on top of that. I've got like several pages of notes from like different experiences during this tournament, and so that's one of those things where you have to take a look at that timing and think to yourself, okay, do we tweak this timing because this is becoming so complicated? It's certainly interesting for the higher level players to have these things happen, but it's also one of those things where like, is there a way to simplify this and remove some of that, some of that mid-action chaos? So that's been really instructive. A lot of crazy corner cases came up over the course of, we played, 8 players played 8 rounds, so we uncovered a lot of stuff over the course of the tournament. And that's always really interesting to me. It's a lot of times you don't see that stuff in your own personal play testing, but as soon as it goes out into the wider world and you just get that volume of play, that's when that kind of thing starts to pop up. I think to some extent players are sleeping on the many arrows as a faction because they don't have a lot of the more obvious strengths. I think particularly when the Many Arrows expansion pack hits and there's 10 characters to choose from, they're a lot stronger than people give them credit for, particularly in deathmatch type scenarios. In terms of an individual character, I would say Abelio MacGavin from the Harpers. He's definitely an underperformer in a lot of scenarios because he just doesn't have the range or the damage or the healing potential of a lot of other characters. But in the right scenario, he's a huge asset because he can get up to speed 6, which can cover a ton of ground, and a well-placed spike growth can really change the game. So I don't think he's going to show up much, but in certain circumstances, he can be a very valuable add to your team, even if it's not someone you normally reach for. Yes, that is very exciting, and hopefully that will be released very, very soon in terms of the storyline OP kit. So that's going to be a store-exclusive event where you can go, once a week during this league and collect all the different pieces of this construct, and then you'll be able to play that character, which is a large figure. It's a big base figure, occupies 4 squares on the map, counts as 2 characters in your team, but gets 2 activations. And on top of that, you can build it as one of 6 different variants. So you can swap the arms and head and backpack and stuff out. If you want a long-range character, you can take the Arbalist. If you want a tactician, you can take a mage construct that can manipulate the positioning of other characters. There's a grappler that can lock people down. There's a defender that's just super tanky, healer. Basically, all the major roles in the game are represented in this construct. And as you play through the 6 scenarios that we're including in this storyline event, you'll get a chance to play all of the different variants and figure out which ones suit your playstyle the best. You'll also get the exclusive paint scheme that's only going to be available in the organized play version of the Ancient Construct. And then, several months from now, once that has kind of cycled through and people have had a chance to play through that, there will be a retail version that collects everything in a box that everyone can enjoy, but it will have a different paint scheme, a different metallic sheen to it, so that the one that you got from your organized play experience is still special and unique. Yeah, well, we're going to continue to produce content for existing players because there is a pretty good fan base growing at the moment. There are scenario packs, which are a way to, for about $25, get an entirely new adventure. They don't contain any miniatures, but a lot of people have collected the Nolzur's minis from Wizkids or various other D&D minis that they can use with the cards and the scenarios that are provided. So that's an inexpensive way to expand your existing experience. But in terms of capturing new players, we are working on a number of products, but in particular, we're working on a new starter set that is going to come in at a much lower price point and be a quicker, more digestible experience, 3-on-3 instead of 5-on-5. Fewer extras, fewer miniatures in the product itself, but like much more accessible way to get into the game. And I think that's kind of what's missing from the catalog right now. Is just like I'm interested in this, but I don't want to commit to it deeply. Is there a way that I can just dip a toe into the waters? And then so that's what we're working on now, and we're hoping that that's not only a great introduction, but also a chance to improve on our rule book, improve on our rules writing, make it really understandable, accessible, easy for people to just open up the box and have a great time. We're always looking to add new characters. We don't want to double up on anything we've already done. And new factions are a possibility in the future. Expansion for existing factions, but yeah, we don't want to do a lot of reprinting, at least in the early days. Maybe several years from now, if something has kind of faded out, we might do a collection or something so people can get their hands on it. But yeah, right now we're really focused on all new content, fresh stuff, so that there's not a lot of repetition. There's definitely going to be more than 10. I think at the very least, we would like every faction to have every class in the game. There's 13 classes, so it's a D&D game. You don't want to leave any classes on the table. So, at a bare minimum, we'd like to get to that 13 number. But, it really depends on the longevity of the game, the popularity of the game. I think before expanding too much beyond the factions that we have now, I think it's more important to introduce a couple more factions and kind of give you more options and more opportunities. But yeah, I think as a goal, 13 per faction is a pretty reasonable one. I think we'll get there before too long. Yeah, it's kind of a balancing act because you can't guarantee that all of your players are going to have access to everything. At the moment, we have to assume that everyone has a core set because you really do need one to play. So everything that we've done prior to this Worlds was all based on core set maps and materials. That being said, we don't want to just stick with the same maps forever. We've already added 3 of the Frogmire Coven scenarios to the tournament, even though the product isn't quite out yet. So I think the overall goal is just have an ever deepening pool of balanced tournament scenarios so that tournament organizers can choose from them and present the ones that they want. So, if a new kind of core product comes out, obviously, there'll be new tournament scenarios based around that product. Just about any product that comes out with a new map is going to have new scenarios. So the idea is that, as the game goes on, there'll be 20, 30, however many scenarios to choose from. And we have the opportunity to continue to balance and update those if we uncover flaws with them. And so we're kind of looking at it as a living resource that is going to be available to all tournament organizers and players to do with what they will. Official events, of course, will choose the scenarios, and we'll try to do that with an eye to balance and progress and kind of a good cadence for a 2-day event, like ease you in and then build up in complexity, and then maybe have more of a lull towards the end where you're tired and you want something a little simpler. So there's sort of a rhythm to how you build an event and you build a set of scenarios to flow. But we were basically just trying to create as many cool things as possible and then let the TOs decide what they're going to run. Yeah, well, I just want to say, thanks to everyone who came out here at Wizkids Worlds. We had an awesome time. It was really, really cool to see all the different strategies and builds and meet a bunch of the most enthusiastic players. I love coming to events like this because it kind of reminds me of why I do what I do, and I get to interact with people directly. So yeah, thanks to everyone who came. I hope to see you again at future events, and I hope to see a lot of new players in the future and meet you as well.